Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in. This is Mr. Potiker here with Unit 2, Lesson 2. And in this lesson, we're going to be looking at the Paleolithic and Neolithic eras of world history to help us better make sense of world cultures. Before we begin, please let me encourage you to open up today's lesson and to fill in any content on the guided notes section and answer any key concept questions that appear in the doc. Thank you, and let's begin. So as you're aware from previous lessons, early man is dynamic and of course ever changing. And because of those features that have developed over time, man has been able to become successful despite tough and trying times. The physical needs of early man were somewhat primitive, but they were met due to their ability to adapt. Early man sewn animal skins to survive the Ice Age. Additionally, tools and weapons were made of stone, bone, and wood. Also, these tools included digging sticks, spears, and axes, which would not only be used for household chores and, of course, hunting and cleaning of animals, but also for later on warfare. Additionally, the caves that were settled by early man and the rocky overhangs for shelter were helpful not just for homes, but also for communal greater cultural building. Inside of these caves, keep in mind, you would find paintings, which many people believe to be early signs of religion and or history. As you can see here by this diagram, early stone tools have developed in many different ways to allow early man to be successful and adapt, from dwindling down dull surfaces and edges into sharp finite points. This is how mankind was able to survive. There are many physiological needs too that early man had. For example, early man were nomadic people. These people were nomads and they moved from place to place, often because of their food sources migrating, but also too because of seasonal changes. Many people in early man times hunted and gathered in bands of 20 to 30 people. These clans or bands were often close family friends or close friends and acquaintances. Early man followed not only the animals and the seasons for ripened fruit, but they also did so with major adaptive skills. They ate fish, fruits, berries, leaves, nuts, grains, and roots. And also with environmental changes came the need to adjust their diet as well. Keep in mind that fire was a game changer, mostly because not just for warmth, but also for cooking. You see, cooked food with fire allows for the brain to grow and the neurological development of the human anatomy to function better. There were many cultural needs too that early man had that were defined by the Paleolithic era. Cave paintings, as alluded to before, were signs of early communication and signs that people actually existed during this era. What can we deduce from these cave paintings? Well, we can probably understand that early man valued animals to a unique extent. They also respected and cared for the dead. Many people might note the fact that early man were the first type of mankind to actually have rituals and burials. Early man also stressed cooperation and collaboration among nomadic bands. And with cooperation and collaboration, they were able to find success, despite tough and trying times. These cave paintings here once again show us and tell us that man had a story to tell. We don't know what that story was, but we can deduce from anthropologists and also other people who study these types of paintings to delve deeper into the mystery that early man conveyed. Let's try to tap into the religious beliefs for a second. Early man looked to animal spirits for answers. Many people call this animism. The paintings of half-human and half-animal beings gave a new insight and twist to the story of mankind. Not only did they bury their dead with likely held ceremonies, but because they did bury the dead the way that they did, this allowed for the human anatomy to be preserved in better ways than if it was just exposed to the elements. Early man was believed to have had a strong belief in the afterlife, hence probably why all the care was taken into burying the dead respectively. They also probably dabbled in the art of ancestor worship and maybe even cult-like activity, or at least how we would determine and describe cult-like activity today. Now, women, however, had a really important role in early man times. In fact, often this gets overlooked, but it should be stressed here. Women were worshipped as Mother Earth because it was believed that Mother Earth was the giver of life and food. So women were actually looked up to in many different ways in society. They gathered and stored food, and of course this served them well over time as they understood the importance of storing food for long winters during the ice ages. And even pregnant women were protected as a vital sign for ensuring survival of the civilization. Additionally, many changes would mark a change to the Neolithic era. Before we begin, please let me encourage you to think like this. The main difference between the Paleolithic and Neolithic era is that when mankind settles, new civilizations and formal settlements are born. The planet's climate not only turned warmer over time, but this brought huge geological and geographical changes. The first farming began in the Neolithic era, and the first domestication of animals became present. If you remember earlier on, we talked about the domestication of wolves into dogs as man's best friend, and the same phenomenon basically happens to other farm-like animals. There were more advanced tools that allowed mankind to do more things than they could have ever imagined before in the previous era. And additionally, the Neolithic era sees the rise of the full-scale village. More food leads to a larger population, and these populations would often find ways to live longer. These permanent settlements and villages had elaborate systems of social hierarchy that often gets overlooked by today's times. They valued personal possessions. In fact, many of these personal possessions have been studied by anthropologists alike. And additionally, the system of governance for the community was essential to keep the village together and to keep everyone functioning properly, despite, once again, tough and trying times. The Neolithic era farm tools, as you guys can see here, are definitely much more advanced than the Paleolithic tools that we talked about before. And it's no surprise as to why. As mankind builds, mankind transforms. Let's take a few moments of your time to also talk about Neolithic settlements as they expand. Once people began to grow food, they also began to settle, and these settlements, of course, were more elaborate and advanced than what most people might give credit for. Villages allowed populations to grow larger, and all of a sudden, the immediate family began to be much bigger too. Immediate families would give rise to extended families, and many different types of communities would have different types of cultural structures within inside them. Villages turned into larger agricultural settlements, including Çatalhöyük in Anatolia, which is in Turkey with 6,000 people, and also Jericho in present-day Israel with 2,500 people. As you can see here by our notes, the change and shift from Paleolithic to Neolithic times is forever important to understand, because the story of us revolves around main themes of adjusting, adapting, evolving to make life for ourselves better as full-scale civilizations. Thank you very much for tuning in, and remember to complete the rest of your notes accordingly. Remember, you can replay any part of this presentation that you might need for clarity.